Welcome back to Financial Fortitude. I'm Michael Acosta, joined by my co-host, Brady Hemmerly.
And today we're diving into something that I think a lot of people feel, but don't always have the language for.
Yeah, most people think financial planning is about solving problems. But what we've seen over time is that the real value comes after the problems are actually solved.
Precisely. The conversation shifts from how do I fix this to what am I actually trying to accomplish or build?
So today we're breaking down how financial planning evolves from problem solving to purpose-driven actions, and how that looks whether you're a young professional, a growing family, a business owner, or approaching retirement. Welcome to Financial Fortitude, a podcast for high earners, families, and business owners. We're your hosts, Michael Acosta
and Brady Hemmerly. Each week we bring purpose-driven financial guidance to you so you can be assured you're on the right path. If you're looking to become an extraordinary wealth builder, let's dive in. Michael, I'm pretty excited about this topic because I feel this is where financial advisors or financial planners, professionals can step into really the limelight and provide value beyond what is just simply numbers on the page or solving a mathematical equation for clients. And I think that's something that we really strive to focus on in our practice is how do we solve the math problem? Because that's certainly a component of planning, but really understanding and working with clients to help them solve what is life's meaning to you, right? What are you looking to accomplish, knowing that the financial plan and the money that you have is nothing more than a tool or a means to accomplish your goals?
No, absolutely. I think it's very easy to put financial services professionals into a box or into a camp of either insurance focus, investment management focus, but very rarely when talking with prospects or clients is the immediate thought, okay, this is someone who is really thinking bigger picture and maybe oversees all of it, not just in the present moment, but even 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now is what's being forecasted and prepared for or planned around. And the best conversations that we have with prospects and clients, personally, in my opinion, is when we have those deeper, meaningful conversations and we're addressing or posing the hard questions that never even came to the forefront because, as you mentioned, it wasn't the initial pain point or the broken bone that drove them into the office to meet with us.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. So when we get introduced to clients or we observe clients and prospects who are doing things out on their own, what we tend to find, at least I would argue, is that many individuals approach financial planning from a more reactive standpoint. And what I mean by reactive is I know there's a problem, or perhaps I'm unsure if there's a problem, and I need to figure out a way to fix that problem. And oftentimes the way to fix that problem is by slapping a solution or a Band-Aid on it and hoping that it works out based on what I'm actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I would say that that is spot on. It's usually a concern, an anxiety, or an exciting time in their life that is occurring that is creating this need for action, whether it's, hey, we just got married and now we're trying to level up, or, hey, I am thinking about starting to slow down as a business owner and I want to see if there's any real teeth in potentially listing my business and exiting it successfully. What does that entail? Because the excitement's not there anymore. Or maybe it's, hey, one of my close friends' spouses passed away untimely, and that's really jolted me because I know we've put off getting our estate planning documents finalized, and we probably don't have enough life insurance because we never thought that this was a reality for us.
Or in many instances, it's as simple as, hey, I just got an inheritance, a bonus, a sum of money. I just have really no idea what to do with it. Or I finally looked at my statement after the last couple of weeks, months, years, and I feel like I'm underperforming or could be doing better, right? What's the solution to this problem?
Yeah, and I would say the last one that comes across our table very frequently based on who we tend to work with is the young medical professional that's now no longer a full-time student or in training full-time, and their income has 6x'd, and now it's like, okay, now I really need a game plan for how to address this 6 to 7 figures in student loan debt.
So if we're talking through reactive stuff, I feel like I need to make a change with my portfolio. I feel like I need to look at my insurance again. I feel like it's time to list my business. Like these are things that we're hearing pretty consistently. As you're having conversations, Michael, what are some of the more emotional things that you may not be hearing directly from the client, but are going on behind the scenes or underneath the hood?
Yeah, in my mind, there's usually a hidden pain point that is protruding or putting pressure on these other topics or areas of their world. So, for example, let's use the medical professional that's transitioned out of residency into practice. Income is, 5 to 6x, and needing a more intentional strategy around addressing their student loans. Well, the reason why they need that is because even though their income has increased significantly, one, they either don't know what to do with all of the cash flow that they have left over because they're so used to living in a modest lifestyle when they were overworked and underpaid as a trainee. But also, their student loan payment's going to increase significantly if they don't make a prudent choice with how to address the loans. And so that suffocates their cash flow. And then in some instances, it's a conversation of, I've been waiting for my income to increase to this level, and it still feels like I don't have enough. And so the main pain point is the student loans, but there are all these other areas that we have to start to dissect and work through when taking not only their financial MRI to see, okay, well, where are these broken bones, but also are there any tumors on their balance sheet that need to be reprioritized and moved to the front of the line and get addressed first? But we start to extract other emotional goals or more purpose-driven ideas that they have. We start to recognize that, hey, it's really not the student loans that are the problem. It's that I don't know if I can do these other things that bring more joy and excitement to my world, such as travel, buying my first home, starting a family, really enjoying the fruits of my labor, because this burdensome amount of debt is blinding me.
So to expand further on that, I think a lot of times what we hear is, I need help with my student loans. But what we're really finding underneath of the hood or behind the scenes is, hey, we are now making a lot of money, but with just nothing sticking. It's hard to know what to do with it. I feel like I'm behind because I can't accomplish some of these goals that I've set forth for myself, or perhaps I've just been really burdened with this debt and it doesn't seem like there's any way around it outside of just paying it with all of the funds that I have now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's just one example. You brought up, am I behind? Typically, we're hearing that from the retiree. Now, if that's coming from the pre-retiree, there's a little bit more that we could probably do for them in addressing that concern, but then digging deeper into making sure that there aren't other areas protruding that need to be addressed, right, from a goals or concerns standpoint. And so that's where, if you're not getting asked the right questions, your client may never actually bring those other elements to the table, the other concerns, the other anxieties. And so that's where, as practitioners, asking the appropriate questions in the right manner is really what's going to level up the conversation and level up the actual experience as a consumer in working with a financial professional.
Yeah. And I actually love how you worded or positioned that, because for any listener out there, I think the real call to action here is, hey, if you have been having conversations with your financial professional and those conversations are just simply about the performance that your portfolio has done or the insurance that you need, you may not really be having the conversations that are going to drive the needle from a life perspective. And so as we go through these examples, right, the young professional, the pre-retiree, the mid-family, the business owner, if you're hearing things in this episode, wow, right, that is a feeling that I'm getting or a question that I have that I just can't find the answer to, this really is hopefully the episode for you. So, Michael, before we jump in, as we approach every one of these, I would say, different archetypes of potential clients here, we're going to use a similar process from a planning standpoint or from a conversation standpoint. So before we jump right into, hey, here's what we're hearing from a lot of young professionals, just talk a little bit more about what that line of questioning, what that discovery, what that process generally looks like, because everyone's going to fit into it in some capacity.
Yeah, so with everyone that we meet being process-driven, oriented, the conversations, in my opinion, first start with taking an audit of where we're at today financially, personally, and professionally. And again, we aren't therapists, we're not medical professionals, but we recognize that if there are other areas of your personal world that are out of balance, that can create negative pressure on your financial world. And so that needs to be accounted for through phase one or step one of our 5-pillar process or workflow of saying, okay, well, let's get ultra organized across the board and understanding what all do we have? What are we being offered by our employer? What are our sources of income? What are our debt obligations? What levels of, protection from a risk management standpoint do we have in place? And let's get an audit, no different than you going and getting an annual physical each year, right? Just to get a pulse check of where you're at in your personal health world and journey. Now, step 2 of that pillar framework is understanding what your biggest risks are to the journey ahead with the mindset of, okay, I have 3 choices. I can ignore these risks, I can budget for these risks, or I can transfer the risks. At the end of the day, it's really just being educated on what your options are and then you determining based on your level of risk appetite what is worth transferring to somebody else or just completely ignoring. Third step in this framework, or the third bullet point, is getting really good at saving money. Right? The more of your capital that you're earning that you can put on your balance sheet as opposed to the balance sheets of others, the more flexibility and control you will obtain as far as making financial decisions. Right? We call this or refer to this in multiple episodes as becoming an extraordinary wealth builder. Okay. And again, it's percentage driven so that as our income increases over time, so does the amount that we're able to save, and vice versa if our income goes down. Fourth framework is building liquidity on your balance sheet. Again, optionality, flexibility, ways to leverage your assets in order to achieve multiple goals. All this cannot be done if it's all going to a concentrated area of your balance sheet, like your 401k, 403b, TSP, pension, whatever it might be, right? So we need some liquidity. We need funds that are accessible in a timely manner, but that aren't just sitting in cash, because too much cash can be a bad thing. And then lastly, just identifying ways to trend towards living a debt-free life. A lot of folks come through the door and one of the reactive pain points is, hey, I want to become debt-free because a talking head in the media said that I need to get to a debt-free lifestyle. Well, that may or may not be the right path, depending on one, what does the next 10 to 15 years of your world look like? And what are your hurdle rates? Meaning, what are the interest rates on these debts? Are these good debts or are they bad debts? Can we exhaust the value out of these debts? Because debt has a purpose traditionally, at least good ones traditionally, right? Student loans, mortgages, car loans, things like consumer debt, credit cards, high interest bearing debt. That's not a purpose-driven approach. That's more of a reactive because we didn't lay the foundation and the framework to be able to have control over our financial decisions when life throws curveballs at us.
Got it. So approaching problems, planning from a process-driven standpoint certainly helps make, I would say, the math problem or the planning process much easier. But one of the things that you didn't mention, and I'm sure that you're doing in your practice day to day, is during each one of those 5 pillars, ideally you're stopping and having just as much of a purpose-driven conversation with a prospect or client before jumping right to, hey, this is the solution to the problem, or this is the solution that really improves what your situation looks like, right? Asking the right questions along the way, and each one of those pillars is what really kind of brings things home.
Yes, I did not state that clearly, but that conversation is usually rooted in that discovery phase or the getting organized phase, right, of the 5-pillar process framework. And to your point, that conversation is had at the beginning of every single consultation, because goals, concerns, and things that we want to work through as families, individuals, professionals, retirees, business owners change on a day-to-day basis. Just because we check some goals off doesn't mean that we no longer strive for other things that we want to work towards, right? There's always going to be something new to work towards. And so we want to make sure that we're identifying that, prioritizing it, and keeping it in the forefront so that every dollar from our army of dollar bills is being dedicated to a distinct action and purpose.
So let's jump into a couple of these archetypes, at least where we see a lot of people land. The first one that we were going to speak on was young professionals. So some of the, I would say, real world examples, at least that we're hearing on a consistent basis, are things like, I'm in my career, I'm doing a good job saving, or at least feel as such, but that big goal, home purchase, I'll use as an example, feels a little bit out of reach. Other examples that I'm seeing here is, I've done a great job saving in my 401k, but I am having a real tough time saving anywhere else. And then other things that we're hearing are, I feel like I'm doing a good job or have done all of the things that I'm supposed to, but I still feel behind, or my financial picture doesn't really feel aligned with anything that I'm working towards outside of my balance sheet or outside of my paycheck every other week. Anything else that needs to go in, like here's example challenges that clients are feeling?
Yeah, one of those would be, my car's becoming more unreliable, but I don't have the means to be able to either fit that payment into my budget or have the means to be able to pay for it outright in cash, right? And that kind of feeds into inability to save outside of the 401k or retirement. One of the big problems that I would say that is a core issue within that demographic, I would say, is external pressures of comparing your life to where your peer group's at. And social media has played a role in that, but it's very easy to get caught up playing someone else's game instead of your own game. And so the reactive problem that we're trying to solve in most instances for this demographic, the young professional that's earning good income and just needing some guidance on where to put the pieces on the chessboard in the right place, strategically, in my opinion, really stems from cash flow management. I think solving their cash flow management structure is what then dovetails into them finding the ability to execute on some of these immediate pain points. But once they're then in a position to say, put the down payment on the home, make that purchase and move in, well, now that's where we get to have a more in-depth conversation. Like, hey, you just bought your home, but is it really the way that you want it?
So let's expand on that further, because that was going to be my next question to you is, hey, we're hearing all of these things. Like, here's the challenge, here's the problem. And cash flow organization and management certainly solves that problem. But in your mind, what are some of those like purpose-driven questions that need to be asked or answered to really get to the solution?
I think that in itself can be a loaded question, obviously, depending on the circumstances. Let's take a young professional, for example, maybe a medical professional, and they've been in training for, I don't know, as short as 3 years and as high as 6. And of course, that includes graduate school and undergraduate. So again, if it's 3 years of training and residency plus 8 years in undergraduate and graduate, they've been in school for, over a decade, in training for over a decade. But they can get burnout really quickly. So yes, they finally get into this phase where they're earning income, they're in a position to buy their first home, but they're not in love with their profession anymore. So it's a deeper conversation of, hey, we just bought this home. Awesome. Hey, you're now making 6 figures of income. Great. Hey, you're saving at a decent clip. That's awesome. But that doesn't necessarily bring you joy and excitement. So yes, you've achieved all these goals. You've checked them all off. But what's really motivating you? And very often it's, hey, I really don't want to be practicing medicine well beyond age 55. Okay, expand on that more. Well, maybe I'm an emergency medicine physician. I just don't want the stress of it because up to this point, it's been overwhelming with the anxieties and everything that comes with it from the studying, the training, and now being in it day in and day out. And maybe I want to start a family and get married, and I don't want to be working 24/7. I want to be more present because time is fleeting. Time is a thief. And so how can I start to position myself now so that I have the optionality to stop working at 50, 55? But I don't want to necessarily stop working holistically. I want to transition into something that's maybe less demanding and maybe outside of medicine. Maybe I want to develop an app. Maybe I want to own a bunch of investment real estate to provide passive rental income. Maybe I want to become a florist because I just love flowers, right? And so being able to start to peel back the onion of, okay, well, tell me more about that. And what are things that you're wanting to reprioritize in order to make that in higher emphasis of the financial plan?
Yeah, and I think that's key because a lot of times success on paper is the big house. And success on paper may be the big house with the big mortgage payment, but without really exploring what that actually feels like post-purchase, what it can lead to is just as much of that feeling of burden, right? I have to continue working to continue producing enough income to keep this big house on the books. When in reality, I may enjoy traveling. I may enjoy spending time outside of work. I may have been burnt out over the last 10 years, and I'd like to prioritize basically the flexibility to do whatever it is that I please outside of work. So asking those questions up front of, hey, having the big home in the nice neighborhood with the largest mortgage payment possible makes you feel fulfilled and enjoy what is that next 10 or 15 years of life, then how do we organize things from a cash flow standpoint to actually make that happen? But if you're saying to yourself, I'm a little bit worried, or that house is not actually making me feel as fulfilled, right? We need to consider redesigning what cash flow looks like to prioritize the things that actually fill your cup rather than burden the cup.
Yeah, I recently had that conversation with our friend who we had on the podcast not too long ago, David Seabour, who's a realtor. And it was, oftentimes it's a question around, we understand the financial impact of buying a home in a certain area can have, but how does making that purchase actually impact the overall quality of your life on the personal side of things? Not just the financial side, because yes, the home gives you a place to rest your head, make memories, and keep you safe from the elements. But how does it actually impact the positive side of your world, whether it's a shorter commute, whether it's being at the dinner table every single night when coming home from work and not being late, if it allows you to be more present with your family, if you're the primary breadwinner, right, or one of the primary breadwinners. And one element of this conversation that we haven't actually touched on, but I think is important, is this overall variable of time and timing. And so this is going to be a theme that I think cascades across all the different demographics we're going to talk about today. But let's think about that young professional. Maybe it's, an attorney who's working in corporate law. And we know how demanding that is, working over 100 hours a week. And, you go all through the years of undergraduate, graduate, and law school to take a corporate attorney position, corporate law position, and you're being overworked, you're exhausted, but you're making the highest amount of income that you ever make. And there's this theme of, well, I can't really start to enjoy life until I've banked up enough cash or investments or paid off my student debt, right? Or I'm not willing to take on that risk yet of starting a family, getting married, or proposing until I've achieved this. It's always waiting on the perfect moment. Now, there's a book that I read recently, Unshakable by Father Mike Schmitz, and he talks about that time doesn't make decisions easier. It often makes them harder, in that the longer we wait, the more inertia that's created, which can lead to higher levels of fear, and just overthinking itself builds up, right? Which creates pressure on our decision-making process. So what can ultimately feel like wisdom, in his words, can actually be avoidance. And so what he's essentially saying is, you don't need perfect conditions. You just need enough clarity to take the next right step. And I think that's where those purpose-driven or purpose-focused conversations with your financial advisor can actually be fruitful for you, versus just being reactive and focusing on the minimal needs of, portfolio management, maybe buying some cheap term life insurance for the next 20 years, and then just reviewing once a year and calling it a day.
Yeah, it's just minimal viable solution, or MVP, minimal viable product for what is the next 10 or 15 years of your life. And I love how the author of the book said, hey, time effectively creates analysis paralysis naturally. And if you're not having those purpose-driven conversations early, the best time to start is now, so you can begin to organize your financial world and take action in that cash flow portion of your financial world in a manner now, or even if it may not be perfect, actually makes that true life impact later when it's time to pivot, either from a career perspective, family perspective, living situation perspective, all of the above.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what do you think are some of those hidden costs of waiting when it comes specific to time within this accumulator demographic or this high-performing young professional demographic?
So what comes to mind initially for me is a word that we'll hear in the financial industry quite often, but it's just this idea of opportunity cost, right? Let's take the family as an opportunity cost, right? I may be working a high-intense job and be waiting to either bank a certain amount of dollars, bank a certain amount of experience, or get to a place where I feel financially comfortable enough to go out and start a family and really expand my world beyond my career. That can be viable for some, but from a timing perspective, right, we all know as parents, the older that we are, the less quality time that we may have with our kids, either in the younger half of their journey. It's much harder to be a parent at 40 than it may be at 30, just from a physical and energy perspective. And then from a much longer time horizon perspective, we know if we start a family much later, there'll be less time on the back end, ideally when many of our older clients are enjoying the best years of their lives with grandkids. So from a timing perspective there's a huge opportunity cost just in experience. I'd say there's also opportunity costs from a financial perspective. We take the housing market as an example. Clients may not have been ready to purchase a home when interest rates are low and home prices had not yet bounced, right, in 2020, and we're waiting for the perfect time or enough dollars in the bank, only to find that interest rates move adversely or home prices move up quicker than expected, and now that home that could have been within reach back in 2020 is just notably out of reach now. And then I think the last big one, at least that comes to my mind, is this idea of risk appetite. The longer that we wait, the more analysis paralysis that we're feeling, just making any decision at all. But the longer that we wait and the older that we get, naturally, I would say most human beings become more risk adverse. It doesn't feel as comfortable to jump in or make the leap after 10 years of waiting to make that leap as it would have just to jump in and make the leap and figure it out thereafter. So I love how you positioned that, quote, time is really being the biggest unknown, and at least the real focus on what to maximize in your financial world, right? We can slap a portfolio solution on any of these reactive or temporary problems, but the deeper conversations with most of our clients is, hey, how do I get my time back? How do I prioritize my time? How, as a young professional, am I preparing to really maximize my time, what might be 10, 15 years out when I don't have any conception of what that actually looks like?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that that's spot on. And I think instead of asking yourself, when is the perfect time to do X, Y, and Z? I think you reframe it and start to shift it to what is the right thing that I should be doing now to get me closer to X, Y, and Z, even if it's not perfect, right? Even if it's imperfect, but it's incrementally helping me make progress towards it, right? And I think that can dovetail us into the next demographic, which is really focused on the next phase of life of being a young family where it's chaotic. Chaotic in the sense of, okay, I went from being single and independent to now joining forces with my superhuman spouse, right? And we're leveling up and we have all this opportunity in front of us, but it's not really coordinated because we're both so used to being independent and only needing to rely on ourselves, and now we're delegating. It's almost like being self-employed as a solopreneur to then scaling and growing your practice and your team to taking on employees to help you from a delegation standpoint. So how do you actually coordinate through this chaos, right? And some of the problems that we see are obviously competing priorities. And I think you're going to see competing priorities across any demographic. It's just the priorities are a little bit different. So in my mind, it's okay, competing priorities around kids, right? Dependents. Competing priorities around, are we in the right home? Can we raise a family in this 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2.5-bath townhome? Or do we need something bigger? Are we saving the right amount? Or is the raise that we're getting every year automatically being absorbed through the lifestyle creep because of the demands of all these other areas of our personal world? And that lack of clarity, I think, goes back to, well, analysis paralysis. How do I actually take action on this?
And some of those actions can be very impactful or meaningful from an experience standpoint. I think things that I hear quite frequently is, hey, we feel like we've done a pretty good job up to this point, but I really don't know if we should or can take the family to Disney or to take the family overseas. I feel like that we've been doing pretty well up to this point, and I'd love to take a step away from my career, or at least slow things down a little bit, but I'm worried about either jeopardizing my retirement or my kids' future if I'm not pedal to the metal every day at work. Or it's, hey, I'm saving for both retirement and my kids' college, and I feel like I should be putting more away towards my kids' 529 plan or college fund, but I just don't really know how that impacts me, and I won't make a change or haven't made a change up to this point because I'm just paralyzed by how many different competing actions and priorities I have to take all at once.
I love that because, again, I think those are going to be the core themes, the core reactive problems that come through the door. And the way that this starts to get framed out more intentionally is, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Clyde, let's expand on that further. You're saving 20% now across the board to your investments, cash savings, and your retirement. You guys are living within your means, but your children are 9. How many more years do you have until college, right?
At that point, Right.
9
It's
or 10
basically
years.
9 years. Yeah.
Yeah. You've not gone and taking any, what I would call extravagant trips or experience up to this point because of fear of derailing your retirement or because you've been so hyper focused on eliminating debt. Again, the broken bone. And what if, let's just think about it and role play this. What if you reduced from saving 20% a year to say 17 or 15% a year, but you added in annually a trip to Europe or international with your family, and you start to give your kids and your family some life experiences? What if you take your kids to Disney once a year or once every 3 years or whatever? And again, going to Disney is not cheap for anyone who's ever been there. Going to Europe, in many instances, may be cheaper than actually going to Disney World. But it's the idea of creating memories because, one, we all know time is not promised. And going back to what we've been talking about up to this point, if you're waiting on when the time is perfect, you are going to be waiting for a long time because the timing may never be perfect. So you have to coach yourself through or be coached through that if you know something is good, true, or necessary, there could be probable cause to take action in that. Again, good or true or necessary in the sense that, hey, my children are 9. They will be out of the house before you know it because the days are long and the years are short. But you never take the same kid on the same vacation because they get older each year. Their likes change every year. Like you mentioned earlier, as you get older, you don't have the same level of energy, right? I have 4 children. Every single one of my children is having a different experience with their father because of the phase of life that I am at when they are born, as opposed to my first child versus my 4th child. And so it's how do you act on that, but also coaching the client through that.
So I'd say important questions or purpose-driven questions that I'm pulling out of this is it more important to fund or really build your financial plan around experiences, family, meaning, or is it more important to build your financial world around a potential financial model, accumulating dollars, getting to a certain number on the page? I think when you look at yourself in the mirror, when many clients do, or ask that tough question, it becomes much clearer to them. It's certainly a balance, but from everything that's actually going on paper, what you're saying and what's happening in your financial world do not look the exact same.
Yeah, and they never will. And this is whether it comes to investing, whether it's having as a business owner some instability with your income from year to year just because of business cycles, market cycles, or even like just waiting for life to slow down, right? Like our personal world is very busy right now because at least 2 out of the 4 kids are in activities, right? Sporting activities. That takes up a lot of time. And so it is almost like a lifestyle shock for us because of not having that to now having it and it just feeling like there's less time than what we originally had. And then that becomes the distraction from everything that we're trying to be intentional on. And so that's where in this book they mention, progress is built on imperfect action taken early, not perfect action taken late.
Just jumping to the next lily pad,
Correct.
Not trying to find the final one.
Yep. You don't have to get to the finish line in one leap, but making that incremental progress with the understanding of, okay, this fills my bucket more. This brings me more joy than receiving a 23% return. Yeah, that's fun, but what does that actually convert to, right, in my personal world?
So I'd say for families in the midst of chaos, getting organized and aligning what's most important to you from a personal perspective and a financial perspective is going to be key, at least in beginning to design or perhaps readjust what your cash flow plan looks like. And then what we really haven't spoke about, it's where really the protection component, the risk management component of anyone's financial world or balance sheet begins to get framed a little differently. Michael, I'm sure you could expand further on that, but as you have had more kids, your cash flow plan and where you're prioritizing your next dollar from a meaning and purpose standpoint has certainly changed, but the stakes are raised more than when you were the young professional, just married, in your first home, right? All of that stuff. So it's also about coordinating, where do my biggest risks now lie, especially that there are other people that rely on me, and how are they also being balanced, knowing, as we've said, time's not promised, tomorrow's not promised.
Absolutely. This will allow us to now transition into, okay, well, how is this any different for a business owner, right? We already know the business owner's life is very chaotic. It is very
Because they've got everything else
overstimulating.
going on in the family life, and then they have a business on the side of it that they're
Right.
juggling. It's
Right. They're not only working on their business, but they're also working in the business, right? And some of the pain points that or the problems or the reactive events that are arising in their world that bring them through the door is, hey, I met with my CPA and they said that I need to set up a retirement plan because I'm paying too much in taxes. Or, hey, we're crushing it in the revenue column, but I'm still not able to take any money home. Right? I feel like I'm still behind the 8 ball, but the business is thriving on paper. Or how do I get my time back because I'm constantly stuck having to put out the fires in the business for our customers from a business development standpoint, and I have no time to actually work on the business or just focus on my personal world or family. So how do I get my time back? And I really don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life. Yes, it was fun when I started it. Yes, it's provided fruits for me to prune. However, I've just lost the motivation. The excitement's not there anymore. But I don't know what the next phase actually looks like.
So let's talk further about that. Like, you're hearing a lot of those problems, and a lot of them is just a very push-pull versus income that my business is generating, income that perhaps I'm not taking, and it's very push-pull. How much time do I get inside of my business or inside of my personal world? What are some of those purpose-driven questions that you're challenging business owners to think of before jumping straight to slapping a tax solution on there or readjusting a portfolio?
Yeah, I would say one of the first questions that I'm asking them, and this is probably not, the best question, would be, have you ever read the book Profit First? So it's this idea of, are you paying yourself first, right? You're the one taking all the risk in starting this business. You're the one doing most of the higher, revenue producing activities for the business and, offering these opportunities for your employees, your rank and file. But traditionally, the business owner is living very lean for the first couple of years by way of being able to support everybody else's dreams. And that's very charitable in nature, but you owe it to yourself to pay yourself first and also to dedicate some of your revenues to a overall discretionary bonus type of bucket for yourself. So if you're a business owner and that really hits home with you, I definitely encourage you to go read the book Profit First and reach out to us and we can work you through the framework of how to implement that. But a lot of this just becomes more of prioritizing you and understanding how valuable your time is. So asking those questions, one, are you using Profit First? Are you paying yourself first? We know on paper from a technical standpoint what it costs to run your business and what you need in your personal world, but what are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of taking capital out of the business and investing in your personal world? You told me you want to take these trips with your kids because for the last 5 years, you've been so focused on building and being a builder in your practice or in your business. And so you've missed out on 5 years of vacations with your family, or you've been mentally absent on vacation, quote unquote, because you're still working while you're there. Well, guess what? Now your kids and your spouse and your marriage and your relationships are 5 years older. And so, we're not getting any younger. That's often said in many conversations. So what's holding you back from harvesting the fruits of your business and redirecting them in your personal world or making other investment opportunities for you to be able to scale and shed some of these lower revenue producing activities so that you can then elevate yourself to a different level as a business owner, but also potentially as a spouse and a father?
And I think to further expand on that question, oftentimes the pointed, purpose-driven questions to clients is, what are you truly building? Right? Are you building toward a mechanism to free your time for your family and for your personal hobbies and endeavors? Are you building something to strategically exit, to really cash the check toward what is that next stage in your life? Or are you building something that perhaps has a legacy-driven impact, either for kids to step into, for an employee to take over, or for an impact that you have on a community or a sector of some kind? And I think that answer, of course, changes consistently with business owners, but having those conversations, hey, when you started this thing, what were you building, right? What were your thoughts? Now that you're 5 years in, are you still building the same thing? Or just given how your life has changed, are you now really building something different? Because oftentimes what we find with many business owner clients and prospects is, I'm taking action in efforts to work toward a strategic exit, but I'm really just looking to buy my time back, right? Or perhaps originally I was taking action to build some kind of legacy in some capacity, but I don't even love it anymore, right? I just want to get out and can go on and live the next phase of my life that is not me being a business owner. So asking those questions, what were you building? What are you building now? What is the real exit ramp look like in some capacity? I think helps frame what type of planning really needs to happen or to look like.
That is 100% accurate, and I love it. And those are great questions to ask. And I would expand on that further, especially if the business owner's at a point where they're just not as excited. They're not coming to work every day with the same level of enthusiasm. And, they want to exit because they've obviously built something that they feel is beautiful. Most business owners think that their business, quote unquote, baby is the prettiest baby in the pageant, right? Now, of course, we know beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So everyone's not going to think that your baby's the most beautiful baby in the world when it comes to your business. And so you exit the business, but a great question to ask them is, okay, well, once the travel's done, once all the parties and celebrations have passed and you're taking down the decorations and it's just you or you and your spouse at home 7 days in a row, are you fulfilled? Because there is data provided by the Exit Planning Institute that shows that 75% of business owners who sell profoundly regret it within the first 12 months. Why? What did they do wrong?
You said it earlier, right? It's the years fly by, but the days are long. And when you're used to running your business basically 24/7, all of a sudden those days of you doing absolutely nothing, I think all of us have had that experience where we're looking up at the clock just waiting for the hour to be over and it feels like an eternity. And now all of a sudden as a business owner, you've stepped out of what really occupied a lot of your time, whether you enjoyed it or not, into basically nothingness. Without purpose-driven planning beforehand, it can create a lot of rifts, I guess, in just how you feel and what your purpose is at that point and what direction that you're heading.
Yeah, well, and again, an analogy that I love that I think is applicable across all the demographics and scenarios that we're talking about today is that early on, we're often playing to win the game, but at some point it shifts to not lose the game, right? If you think about any of your sports teams that you absolutely love, whether it's a professional golfer, tennis player, swimmer, basketball team, football team, whatever, early on in the game, they're playing to win. But then if it's a tight game and they're playing not to lose, those are the most stressful minutes, seconds in the game as both a competitor and a viewer. Now, the question that I pose is, well, what is the other 25% of business owners who sell their business or exit their business successfully? How are they still happy about that choice? And what the Exit Planning Institute actually shows or provides in their data is that the other 25%, the one thing that they had in common is that they actually designed their next chapter before they signed the deal. What does the next act look like, whether it's vocational, whether it's a hobby, whether it's activities, whether it's being able to afford to take your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to the beach, rent a house for a week, or to Europe for a week once a year, right? Whatever it might be, or giving back to the communities, being a mentor to somebody, being philanthropic. There's so much more to it aside from, hey, I've created this awesome widget in this business. It's provided for my family along the way while I was working in it day in, day out, because as a business owner, you never get to turn it off. And now it's, hey, I've converted it from being this illiquid asset to now basically funding my retirement and my legacy. That was very exhausting. Now I can sit back and relax. But because I've been go, 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 and I sit back in my recliner, I'm now antsy, I'm now depressed, and I don't know what's next.
And that well parlays back to this compounding effect of time that we've been speaking of, right? If business owners have those purpose-driven conversations early, it's much easier to perhaps before that exit actually happens, begin to design or prioritize things outside of the business, right? I think from a profit-first mentality, if a business owner can get into the mindset of taking profits out of the business and really leveraging those dollars in either experiences or financial pieces outside of their business, it gives them a leg up 3, 5, 10 years into the future. I think if a business owner is layering tech strategy and longer-term exit planning into the actual work that they're doing, right? It compounds their time impact later. So when they do cross the finish line, even if every step of their next piece of life hasn't been laid out, there's some foundation that's built. The example I give in some instances, we do see this is, all right, I've cashed the big business check. I am ready to sail off into the sunset. I have all of these people that I want to spend time with and experiences that I want to have. But for the last 20 years, I haven't invested in having those experiences or spending time with those people, and they're not around anymore to spend time with, right? My kids are in their career. They don't have time to go off to Europe for a month with me. My business partners or perhaps other professionals and friends that I've had haven't seen that much of me recently because I've been pedal to the metal in my business. And again, I have all of these good plans. I've laid it out, but like you said, time is fleeting, and having that expansive kind of look at what drives me now and what's going to drive me later can help make impacts from a planning perspective today.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, as a business owner, you have to ask yourself, do I own the business, or does my business own me? And I think that is a hard question to be able to answer, especially early on, because it's building. But once you scale it and you can manage it and you can be absent for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 3 months, and the business continue to operate and be profitable, I think that's when there's a transition. However, if you lean into certain frameworks, that's where you can steal time from the future to your present life and actually start to enjoy the fruits that are being produced on the vine of your business.
So I think this is a wonderful transition as we come up on the hour here, a wonderful transition into the last demographic of individuals that we have conversations with very frequently, and it is those who are pre-retiree within 5 years and those who are in full retirement at this point. I've stopped my W-2 job. I've taken my pension payment. I've sold my business, right? I'm completely out of the workforce. And now I am in that sunset phase of life. Depending on whether I've designed it or not is a different question. But Michael, what are some of the problems or like real pain points that we're hearing from clients that, again, are not just my tax bill is higher or not just my portfolio could be doing better?
Yeah, I would say the one that drives most people through the door to meet with their financial advisor or a financial advisor is going to be, do I have enough, right? Have I done a well enough job in preparation to getting to this point? And hopefully, if you are 5 to 10 years out, you're starting that conversation now versus waiting until you're on the 2-yard line going into score, which basically means you're 6 months away from exiting the workforce and retiring. Because you need to give yourself enough of a runway to stress test things, because what we see out there in blog posts, right, one specifically that we've riffed on in the past, is the one that was written by Charles Schwab saying, you need to have $2.3 million in order to be quote unquote wealthy heading into retirement. And that creates a lot of anxiety and stress for a lot of average American households because they may or may not have the capacity to generate $2.3 million over a working career. Maybe they didn't prioritize things the right ways. Maybe they didn't follow a 5-pillar work framework. Maybe they never worked with a financial advisor. And so that's going to be the biggest one is, do I have enough? Because the moment you start to feel insecure about not having enough, well, that puts pressure in all other areas. You start to take on unnecessary risks. You start to play the game in the manner that it's not meant to be played. And that could ultimately lead to your demise. Not always, but there's higher probability of it creating more strain on your overall financial well-being.
Or it goes the opposite direction in that you perhaps lose out on time from an opportunity cost standpoint. We said it before, right? Many clients come to us, do I have enough? That's a huge question. But it's quite as often we get the question is, should I keep working? I think I could make it another year or two. It's not all that hard. Or I feel like I should work until 67 when, again, clients who really haven't done their due diligence from a planning standpoint and a purpose standpoint, like you could retire tomorrow. Right? There are many clients that we see who retire and then 3, 4, 5 years later, that journey has ended for them. And I'm sure many of those people would have loved to have had those extra 2, 3, 5 years in retirement, knowing that, hey, a life until 95 or 100 is really not promised for everybody.
Yeah, and I would argue that waiting for that perfect timing is probably really just fear in disguise. Fear of not having clarity around what the next phase looks like. But the simple question to ask coming into this is, well, do I have enough? Or will my income be sustainable? Or, we're currently living in a year where, the market's pulled back and my retirement's taken a hit. Should I delay retiring one more year? And I think those are lower level questions to focus in on. And so I'm curious, you have the client that comes in and their main concern is, do I have enough? What questions are you asking them to be more purpose driven, more intentional around understanding where that might be stemming from, or what's protruding subconsciously, with that being the leading question?
I think one of the questions that I'll pose to clients is really more focused on how they're measuring their success in retirement. I think the industry itself typically measures success in retirement by whether or not a portfolio is going to survive. And I'll put survive in quotation marks because I'd ask how long, how much risk. There's so many questions there, right? Success is driven, do I have enough? Question is, am I going to survive? But oftentimes the question that I'm asking clients is, well, how are you going to measure success, right? Are we measuring success in retirement by the fulfillment that you have, the experiences that you are allowed, the things that you're able to do, the meaning that you find? Or is it whether or not the portfolio will survive? There's always going to be a balance between the two because it's hard to feel fulfilled when we have no resources whatsoever. But there are many instances where clients will come to us and say, do I have enough? And on paper, right, through stress testing and modeling, it's quite easy to say, hey, this thing's going to survive. But again, I'm asking those questions back. It's going to survive. Well, what's going to be meaningful or going to fill your cup from a fulfillment standpoint? And then other questions are like, how are you going to spend your time? Is it experiences? Is it giving? Is it volunteering? Is legacy important to you? It's really just framing as much as possible about intentionality rather than just stress testing and mathematical analysis.
No, I love that. And I guess there's obviously multiple camps when it comes to retirement. It's those who want to die with none left, right? They want to spend it all and leave nothing, bounce that last check when they're called off this earth. And there are others who want to, from the other extreme, leave this earth with an abundance of a legacy. But by challenging them to define their level of success in retirement, I think is awesome because it likely forces them to describe the years in their go-go years phase, their slow-go years and their no-go years more intentionally, which you then giving you as the practitioner the ammo that you need to better formulate the blueprint to, hey, how do we make this a reality? Because at that point,
and
it's really
frame the why.
Yeah. Frame the why so that I can help you find that success rate. Because this isn't the end of work or your ability to work. It's really the beginning of choices that you now get to make based off of how you want to lead moving forward. So I don't think it limits you. I think if it's framed in the right manner as a retiree, it's empowerment. As an advisor, we love being able to tell our clients, go take more trips, go spend more money, right? You can't take it with you when you're gone.
Yeah.
When you're gone, people often say you never see a hearse with a trailer attached to it going to the burial site. But live life, make those memories. What's the point of working so hard if you're just going to store it up in the china cabinet?
Yeah, again, so if you're a retiree client and you're consistently asking yourself, hey, either do I have enough? Is my portfolio going to survive? Right? These are the type of questions that one would hope a financial professional is asking, or these are the type of questions that you and your spouse need to start having conversations around, right? What's going to bring the most impact and meaning to me as a person, to our family as a legacy, and to the experiences that we're living?
Yeah, and as we wrap this up, because we know, we've gone a little bit longer than what most of our episodes look like, I think the main focus coming out of this, regardless of which demographic or camp you fit into, is really that stabilizing the situation is what the foundation of the relationship involves. The reactive issues is what's bringing you through the door. It's the broken bone that takes you into the emergency room. However, through tests and further analysis, yes, we adjust and fix the broken bone, but we identify, hey, there are other areas in your personal world that need to be better addressed or planned around because they might be quote unquote tumors or higher risk diagnosis that need to be addressed and reprioritized. So it's, hey, let's stabilize it. And then let's make it as efficient as possible for you, mindless for you, so that you don't have to think about it. Let's automate some things, which is really just, a lot of different words for optimizing the situation. So let's stabilize it. Let's optimize it. But then let's connect the money that you're actually earning to meaning and purpose.
And I think that's the disconnect.
Yeah.
It's between there where the disconnect happens. Optimization happens and then everything else stops. It's okay. We've got an optimized plan and there's still more to consider after that.
Yeah. Now it's the alignment phase. Like we have to align it. We have to connect the money to the meaning and the purpose and be more intentional. And it's okay to think about that, right? I wouldn't say it's nearly as quote unquote tangible. You might think differently, but it's more personalized. And I think that's what makes it exciting and personalized for every individual that we cross paths with. So don't stop at just the optimization. Let's actually lean into the alignment piece so that you can then say, okay, what is all this for? Right? Why are we doing all this? Is it to make our lives easier when life throws a curveball at us, whether it's for ourselves or for our spouses or our children? Like, what are we doing this for? Define that, write it down, post it up somewhere.
So if you're listening and you're in that problem-solving type of phase, it's not necessarily a bad place to be. It's what brings most clients through the door.
Right. It's actually exactly where you should be. But just know that's not the finish line. It's actually the starting point. There's more work to be done.
And the goal isn't just to fix your finances. It's to build a life that actually feels aligned and having conversations that help drive towards really connecting all of the pieces.
And if you have questions about where you are in your journey today, and maybe your current plan isn't filling up your cup, whether you're just getting started or thinking about what's next, we'd love to be able to provide guidance and assistance. So head on over to www.genesiswealthplanning.com/AMA, submit your questions. Maybe we'll feature them on future episodes like we've done in the past. Or feel free to schedule a complimentary consultation at no charge to you, and we can just have a conversation because honestly, that's where it all starts.
And as always, if you found value in today's episodes, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it.
Are you considering hiring a financial advisor? If so, be sure to listen to episode 1 of Financial Fortitude. In this episode, we discuss the reasons why many people choose to hire a financial advisor and highlight the key qualities you should look for in the financial professional you decide to work with. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Genesis Wealth Planning LLC, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. All scenarios and names mentioned herein are purely fictional and have been created solely for educational purposes. Any resemblance to existing situations, persons, or fictional characters is coincidental. The information presented should not be used as the basis for any specific investment advice. Michael Acosta and Brady are registered representatives and financial advisors of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS. Securities, products, and advisory services offered through Park Avenue Securities, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representatives of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. Park Avenue Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Consolidated Planning Group, Inc. and Genesis Wealth Planning, LLC are not affiliates or subsidiaries of Park Avenue Securities or Guardian. Michael Acosta's California Insurance License Number 0M50974 and Brady Hammerly's California Insurance License Number 4353077.
7237198.30 expiration 328.